I'm Julie Alexandria.
And I'm Jennifer Mercedes.
Between the two of us, we have over 2 decades of experience working in professional sports.
We're telling the stories of women who are at the top of their game in sports and business.
Welcome
to the locker room.
Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of Locker Room Talk. I'm Julie Alexandria here with Jennifer Mercedes, and we are talking to women working at the height of their game in the sports and business industries. So our guest today, Miss Alana Meraz, saw a void in the industry, a white space, if you will, filled with nary a person of color. In an industry that outwardly celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month, the lack of actual Hispanic heritage was pretty glaring. So as the founder of Latinx in Sports, our guest today aims to shine a light and to change all of that. Welcome to the show, Alana Meraz. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much, Julie and Jennifer, for having me. I'm so excited.
All right, let's get started with a quick fire round. We want to get to know you a little bit, so answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Mariachi band or salsa band?
Mariachi band.
Colada morada or horchata?
Horchata.
Would you rather be royalty 1,000 years ago or just an average person today?
Average person today.
Travel back in time to meet your ancestors or travel to the future to meet your future grandchildren, great-grandchildren?
I would travel back in time to meet my ancestors.
Okay, would you only eat tacos for 1 year or not eat any tacos for 5 years?
Only eat tacos for a year.
Be able to speak any language or be able to speak to animals?
Be able to speak any language.
Now that would come in handy. Awesome. I love your answers. And I have to agree with you, the taco thing, I would eat tacos for a year. That's not a problem for me.
Yeah. Feel like I eat them once a week anyway. So for a whole entire year should be fine.
What's every day for a year? Okay, so we want to talk about your initiative, this idea you had for Latinx in sports. You had this idea that for every day of Hispanic Heritage Month, that you were going to highlight one Hispanic sports professional. So tell us how you came to this conclusion, how you came up with Latinx in sports, and how you got to this.
Yeah, of course. So it really started, we were in the peak of the pandemic. It was October 2020. I think we had just hit 6 months of sitting at home. And I was like, it was Hispanic Heritage Month, and being a Latina and my family being from Mexico, I've always looked up to other Latinos in the sports industry, especially Latinas, being a woman in the sports industry. And I wasn't really seeing any sports organizations, teams kind of highlighting their Latino front office. So I kind of decided to take it into my own hands. And I was like, I would love to learn more about those trailblazers in the industry that are now VPs, are now directors, made a space for themselves and paved the way for the future generation like me and those that will come after me. So when I was looking for, some sort of resource, a list, kind of, thinking that someone else had done the similar thing, I didn't really see anything. I think the last list was from 2019 and it had incredible Latinos on it, but I was kind of looking for MJ Acosta, for Jennifer, other sports professionals that I knew that were, I guess, almost more accessible in a way that I knew that if I introduced them to somebody else or was like, hey, if you want to network, here's this person that might do what you want to do one day. I was kind of looking for that kind of list. So just during Hispanic Heritage Month, I was researching different people. I would find one person and I'd be like, hey, do you know anybody else? Because it was hard to find people, unless you're looking on their Twitter bios or if you think their name sounds Latino, which even then that's an assumption. It was really hard to find those other Latino and Latinx sports professionals. So from meeting somebody at MLS, I would find somebody else at MLS, somebody at NFL. And yeah, it's kind of where the list came about. And once the month was over, I knew that I felt so empowered and inspired to be a Latina in the sports industry. And I wanted to portray that to somebody else. And I wanted other people that might have still been in college or might even be going from high school to college and are trying to figure out hey, is this something that I can do because it's out of the traditional career path or kind of the traditional majors or, careers that were kind of taught in high school. So yeah, that's kind of where Latinx in sports came about.
Thank you, first of all, for putting me in the same sentence as MJ Acosta. We had her on the show and she's awesome. So love MJ. But now your partner in this is Juliana Lara. And since we're talking about highlighting female colleagues and working relationships, tell us about your collaborative effort and combining your skills to launch the platform.
Yeah, so Juliana, we had actually met also in the peak of the pandemic. I think I had met her in September, and it was via Zoom because we were both volunteering for an event. And she was doing PR, and I was helping them with social media. And we realized that we had both gone to school in Arizona, that she was also Latina. She loved baseball just like I did. And when I came up with the idea for Hispanic Heritage Month, I was like, hey, like, being a Latina, like, what is your opinion on this? And she's like, yeah, I think that's a great idea. She would find people on Twitter too and send them to me, be like, hey, you can highlight this person tomorrow or next week. So she definitely was supportive in my idea. And once I decided to create the social media accounts for Latinx in sports, I actually have like the screenshot of the text, and I tell her one day it'll be in our office that we share. I really just texted her and I was like, hey, I did a thing. This was my idea. After highlighting these people for a whole entire month, I want to create this community because I think we all look for a community and some sort of support system within the sports industry, and to be able to create that for not only myself and for her, but for other people that might need that support. Yeah, she was fully on board, and she was like, yeah, let's do it. And now we're almost to a year since we created it last October, and it's been crazy to see the amount of growth.
That's amazing. I want to ask you about creating that social media handle, because so often when you come up with an idea, that's the first thing you go to. Social media is accessible, it's free, anybody can do it, but to do it right takes skill. So did you have any sort of prior knowledge to how to market something on social media? And since you've had it up there for a year, what has been sort of the most successful practices that you've seen that anyone can take into account when trying to launch something of their own?
Yeah, I think I didn't really go into it with a plan. I think the way we really thought about it the first couple of months, we're like, okay, like, what's the idea? What's our goals? Where do we want to be in 6 months? Where do we want to be in a year? And for us, it was like, okay, creating a board. So that initial networking call that we had when I had highlighted all these people, really where it started was I had tweeted, if you were a Latinx sports professional or up and coming one, like if you want to hop on a networking call. So that's also kind of where, I guess that goes back to the previous question. That's also where I got the idea of Latinx in sports, because once we had this networking call, there's like 15, 20 of them on there, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I want to be a part of this community. This is a great idea. Like, run with it. So going back to the social media portion, I think we took ideas of what they wanted to see. So it was a mentorship program, a community, monthly calls where we could continue growing the group. But really, I think any tidbits or advice for me was just to find relatable content. It was, asking those questions. I think the other day we tweeted something about like, hay comida en la casa. That's like what your mom always says, right? So it's like, it's relating, and it doesn't always have to be about sports, but it's finding those things that are relatable, that you read that and you're like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like, that's happened to me. Or, oh, I love seeing the Mexico softball team at the Olympics, or this Argentinian, Olympian player. And it's not even past, me and Juliana being Mexican. We wanted to make sure that we represented all the other Latinx countries and, Afro-Latinos and everything in between, because I think often it's easy to assume it's only one demographic, but really looking into account that it's all these different people, and we all share, to a certain extent, the Spanish language, but then it's all different, in different country that you go to, and finding that relatable content for each of those communities that are part of our larger community.
Now, you mentioned the mentorship, right? So the importance of mentorship within the community. Whom have you, through Latinx in sports, maybe that was somebody that gave you some really good advice? Who was somebody that you really appreciated talking to?
Yeah, I think our board members are definitely our sounding board when it comes for Juliana and I for our different ideas that we have. But personally, I didn't have a mentor in the sports industry until really I curated Latinx in sports. And through Latinx in sports, I was able to meet someone named Marcela Munoz, and she works for LAFC, and she's their stadium manager. And she really showed me like what it was like to be a Latina in the sports industry, and even past that, to be in the soccer industry. And she has really been one of like my greatest supporters. But also our board, Sarah Toussaint, Yvonne, Vanessa Gonzalez, Walter Franco, Adolfo Romero. Like, these are people that I have yet to meet in person, and I feel like they're some of like my closest supporters. So they've just been incredible mentors within the community for others, and we've seen it reflected. Like, Yvonne has interns that are part of the Latinx sports community, which is incredible to see, almost like that connection that I was able to help create in a way. And knowing that our board will email us, be like, hey, like, these 3 people reached out to me after our networking call, and knowing that they might be their future mentors, and now being able to create a program, because I think it's often very overwhelming to find a mentor, and kind of how you approach that and what that means. So be able to help facilitate that is incredible, and we're so excited for it to launch.
Yeah, and you are fostering those relationships and you are facilitating, bridging the community to the professional sports world. And that's something that can be so daunting to someone just starting out, because sports and the business of sports and front offices can be so impenetrable and they can be incredibly intimidating. And I think there's a vibe of sort of a don't ask me, I don't need help. And this is mine. I'm very protective over it when it comes to people's career paths. How do you combat that sort of I don't need help vibe that can be prevalent in the Latinx community?
Yeah, no, I think that's something that we talk about on every single one of our panels. You know, we ask our panelists, we ask on our networking calls, and I think we've always taken our networking calls and almost put it in a casual setting where it's like, hey, like you don't need to prepare really anything. Like maybe have like your 2-minute like introduction about where you're from and what you do and what you hope to do one day, so someone gets to learn a bit about you. But I can honestly tell you that we come off those networking calls and it's the people tell us like, hey, like that was so much fun. Like I got to meet people in such like a casual setting. It wasn't like we were all in suits in a boardroom, you know, at this conference. And I think oftentimes networking can be such an overwhelming word where you think it's, you know, this very rigid situation. And for us, it was like, no, like we're a comunidad, we're a familia, like, you know, like it doesn't have to be this very like in a box kind of thing. So I think that was a different way to combating it, you know, instead of thinking, okay, I'm networking because I'm trying to get ahead. It was more of like, I'm meeting people because they are supportive of me and because we can all relate to one thing, and that's being Latinx in sports or wanting to be a Latinx sports professional. So I think that's kind of the way that we've been able to frame it is, you know, if you want to share a job, if you want to network with someone and you don't know how to introduce yourselves, ask me, ask Juliana. You know, we are totally open to making that introduction for you. And if you think, hey, I want to work in this certain department, but I haven't seen a Latinx sports professional there, we are more than happy to point you in the right direction, because at the end of the day, like that's what we want to do, is we want to create a larger community of Latinx in sports and help the next generation just like they have helped us, and kind of look back and be able to help those that are coming after us.
That's awesome. That is one of the greatest things I've heard in a long time, as far as just trying to facilitate those relationships between somebody who's seeking an opportunity and those who have the opportunity to give. So congratulations to you guys on what you're doing. And we hear here at Locker Room Talk that you have big plans for Latinx in sports. You've already held panels. You're doing an LLC. So where do you see this in 5 years?
In 5 years. I hope that in 5 years we're able to have more in-person events. I know that that's something that Juliana and I have talked about many times. Adolfo Romero being one of our board members, and SoFi Stadium hosting the Super Bowl this upcoming year. We kind of think that, you know, willingly and hopefully as things start to open up and it's safe to do things, we hope to have an in-person event kind of around that. So I know that's kind of our in the next 6 months goal. But honestly, in our 5-year goals, I really hope that we're able to create some sort of like chapter situation. A lot of our database is based out of California and New York and Florida. So I think it'd be really awesome to kind of have a point leader there that can host those in-person events, because I can't be everywhere. Juliana can't be everywhere, but kind of knowing that our board members are in California, our board members are in Florida, and having them help facilitate those kinds of things, because I think Zoom was great, but as the world was starting to open up, it's kind of like, okay, this is a new reality. And if I'm being honest, I think in the last couple of months, Juliana and I have really taken a step back and sat down and been like, okay, what does this look like outside of the pandemic? Because we thrived thanks to the pandemic, thanks to Zoom, thanks to everybody sitting on Twitter and wanting to network. So what does that look like now past that, and having those different events? We have board members from the PGA Tour, from UTSA, that have been super supportive. They're like, hey, you know, if I'm in a city in PGA and having an event, tell some Latinx, you know, people in this community and like have them come meet me, or I can host them. So I think we've been able to receive a lot of support. So I think in the next 5 years, just having a larger presence and knowing that we were able to create those connections, like Ivana was saying, you know, having an intern from Latinx in sports, and knowing that people can turn around and be like, hey, because of your networking calls, like I met this person and they were able to connect to the next person, and now I got to have a job. And, you know, seeing those relationships and knowing that we were able to facilitate that when all this started from was a Twitter account would be incredible. So, yeah.
I would love to see you guys get started on the collegiate level. because I mean, just working with counselors and guidance counselors and doing a college tour, almost like a college game day, where it's like, let's motivate now, let's get in at the ground level as they're, as Latinx students are coming out of university, and to get them involved even at an internship level. I could just imagine, having, as you said, chapters, but also satellite campuses. I mean, that would be incredible. I don't even know how you would get started in that, but it's just.
But no, Julie, it's a great idea. Just because, I mean, for me, like, I got started in the industry while I was still in college. I mean, I couldn't wait to graduate because, like, school was getting in my way. You know what I mean? So, like, the fact, like, if there's that opportunity, right, to connect, I just happened to have had a neighbor who worked at Telemundo, and so he made that connection. But if you can have it on campus where you have people who can make those connections, I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think for me, I was a part of a different, organizations in college, and seeing how helpful that was to me, even to just know that I had friends within the same classes or that had similar interests in me. I think that'd be something that's incredible. And I will say it's something Juliana and I have looked into, but obviously knowing that college campuses were kind of like half hybrid, half in person, trying to figure it out, is definitely something, like I said, as we kind of go back to that normal and people are able to do more in-person things. We hope to do that one day, and to host, events around a baseball game or all-star game, for MLB and things like that, because that's where our people are, and that's where we can all come together on a larger scale, whether it's just something locally or something where it's the whole entire league is in one place. I think it'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Winter meetings. That's where everybody comes with the resumes in their hands.
Yes. Winter meetings. Yes.
Is at the job fair at winter meetings. All right. Well, this interview turned into a job strategy meeting. I love it. Alana Meraz, we are so incredibly proud of you, and we love to see what you're doing with Latinx in sports. We will keep in contact with you, and I would love to have you back on, 6 months to a year from now, just to see where you guys are at, because the future is so bright. Thank you so much for joining. And where can people find more information on Latinx in sports?
Yes, so we are on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, Latinx in Sports. And my personal handle is Lani Meraz. So if you ever have questions, want more information about the event or about the community, please feel free to reach out to us via our Twitter. Our email is latinxinsports@gmail.com. It's kind of pretty standard across the board, but yeah, we're always looking for new faces, and we love meeting new people and growing our community, and are always here to help in any way that we can.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Locker Room Talk, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
I think women, especially in my experience, tend to question whether they're qualified for a job. There's been a lot of studies that men don't tend to, question whether they're qualified for a job as much. But it takes both sides. I think it takes people applying for jobs to believe in themselves, but it also takes people who are hiring to be willing to take a little bit of a risk. And I think I've been fortunate enough that people in my career have been, willing to look at some of my raw skills and figure that would translate well. But, I think my boss would say, also, you do want to hire someone who feels like they have something to prove in the role, that's going to work their butt off and try really hard because they want to succeed and believe that they can.